All right, I think we are live and up and running. Let's get everything loaded up onto the proper layout, and we will go ahead and kick off today's jam stream. All right, we'll put the model there for now. And let me run a real quick loop just for some background noise. All right, so we are back again to talk about the world of beatboxing and beatbox related things. So I did some thinking during the week, like I usually do before these streams, thinking about what I want to talk about and cover and sort of talk through as far as beatbox techniques, topics, sound theory type things. And what I decided on, since it's been, I want to say it's probably been 2 or 3 streams or so since we last talked about it, would be to return to the discussion of technicality. We'll go through warm up and a little bit of drilling in the beginning, like we usually do. But when we get to sound theory and technique discussion, I want to circle back to the idea of the technicality patterns that I've been practicing, do sort of like a technicality update, like the description says. And then kind of look at experimenting with some of the patterns and sounds that we had and see if we can do anything new, but more do sort of like a status check on the things that were currently in progress and being worked on. After that, we'll see how long that discussion takes as far as the sort of technique and explanation and practice goes. From there, we'll work on BGM for the remainder of the stream. And I do have the synthesizer hooked up. Synthesizer Kun is here. It's just not on right now. But might have a little bit of a different focus on the BGM brainstorming side today, since I want to see what kind of ideas come together and then also sort of try and work towards coming up with things that are going to play into some future projects. And I can kind of talk a little bit about what I've been working on and as it relates to the BGM stuff and where everything's sort of at and the tentative roadmap for things going out the next several months. It'll kind of be in line with what we talked about before, but I can give a little bit more detail and sort of explain my plan. So with that, we'll go ahead and go into warm up, basic drills to get the blood flowing in all the face muscles and get primed to discuss the technique and practice side. So let me turn this off. So that being said, I'm going to run through just a series of simple beats and kind of ramp up complexity, and then we will move on from there. Let's do it. And I'm going to keep an eye on my sound levels too. Let me get OBS a little bit higher up. I'll make sure nothing is hitting super high on the audio levels. All right, now I can see it. So we'll go ahead and get started and go through some warm up. All right. Seemed like that was a little bit longer of a series of kind of different beats strung together really loosely, not super cleanly. But looking at the time, I probably need to do another one of the how long can I freestyle challenges. I think I could do it for decently long. I think my personal best was 20 minutes the last time I did that. Maybe in the future jam stream, we can focus on freestyling and idea creation on the fly as one of the topics, and then sort of fold in the challenge of how long can I go before I have to stop and either run out of ideas or have to stop and physically take a break. Because it's been a while. I think it's probably been several months since I last did one of those. And they're pretty fun, but it does occupy a pretty big chunk of time the longer I end up going. But that could be a thing for a future jam stream, just to sort of bring back one of the ideas and see if I've gotten any better at freestyling. I would hope so. Shouldn't be worse. So let me update my caption. We'll call this practice and sound theory for the next section here. There you are. So practice sound theory. Let's move on to kind of the discussion of technicality, which I said I wanted to cover as the main topic for the sound theory and practice section of the jam stream today. And so this was pretty early in the week, maybe end of last weekend. I was sitting around doing something that was not related to beatboxing, but my brain was kind of turned off, so I just sort of started noodling around with technicality patterns. And specifically, I was messing around with just TKK drills to sort of just fill time. And I realized that I had not been paying enough attention to TKK drills consistently over the last few weeks, because my accuracy and speed, even after warming up for a little bit, going from cold to at least primed and warmed up, beatboxing wise, I felt like my patterns suffered from maybe not drilling them enough. The accuracy wasn't quite there. The speed wasn't quite there. It just felt sloppy and not quite as on point as I would like. And so that told me I'm probably been laxing a little bit too much on the TKK. And I think the main reason for that is because the majority of my technicality practice, whenever my brain has spare time to allocate towards just drilling beatbox stuff, has been the POTO pattern, which we'll talk about today for sure. That's another one I want to sort of circle back to and talk a little bit about, which has been coming along pretty well. I still think I have a long way to go before it's exactly where I want it. But compared to when I started about a month and a half or 2 months ago, maybe, the POTO combo has definitely gained a lot of function and utility. And you probably heard me throw it as a real quick filler in the practice warm-up beats. But as a result, I think I've been neglecting the other patterns that I normally use, maybe because they're a bit more comfortable. But technicality is like any sort of skill that requires a lot of just drilling and practice. If you don't do it consistently, you will lose proficiency with it. And I think for people who've probably been doing it for, 10 years, their basic skill floor is going to be very high. So even if they don't do any technicality for a couple days, they're probably not going to lose a whole lot of proficiency. It's not like they're going to suddenly be unable to do the insane speed patterns they do. But as someone who's trying to get to that higher skill level, I think I need to remember not to neglect doing at least a dedicated amount of technicality practice on all of the patterns in some capacity every day, instead of just saying I'll do it here or there. I think dedicating more time to that more consistently is probably something that I forgot I needed to do. Again, my effort was primarily focused on the POTO because it's the new pattern I'm trying to get down. And so if we go back to the discussion on the TKKs, the triplet pattern, which is the TK rim shot. Done a pretty decent amount of discussion on the technique and explanation. So I'll refer back to some of the older jam streams as far as the breakdown of technique for that one, since I've talked about it a lot. But the TKK is a simple pattern, but takes quite a bit of practice to master and get speed and accuracy when it comes to actually getting the sound set to come out cleanly and have it be functional in a beat somewhere as sort of like a connecting filler chain of sounds. So like we talked about before, at the basic level, you're going to just be practicing triplets over and over again slowly until you get more proficient with it. And then you feel more comfortable, slowly ramping up the speed. And then once you have a good grasp of speed, you start looking at ways of changing up the complexity and how the sound is sort of combined together with other sounds to vary up the patterns. So if we think about kind of like the level one, the starting point for the TKK, it would be something like just sounds pretty basic because it's just three sounds. The way you do them is a little bit difficult to get around. I'd say doing the rim shot, or at least learning that type of snare, is the biggest hurdle when getting to this particular sound set. But once you can do that pretty quickly, then it's just taking the and just practicing that over and over and over again until you start to get them closer and closer together, and they get faster, and you can start chaining it back to back faster until it becomes like a roll, a consistent stream of triplet sounds that loops, and you can use it to form really complex speed patterns and start figuring out where you're going to slot it into your beats, into the beat construction and whatnot. And that's sort of the uphill grind when it comes to technicality. And so sitting there a couple days ago, noodling around and not being too happy with it, I said, I got to redirect my focus back to the TKK and not neglect that pattern, because it's still one that I'm trying to master. And so I think I've been able to sort of start clawing my way back up as far as the proficiency goes. It's still a work in progress, and it will be probably for years. But if we think of the speed, taking the and then ramping up faster in increments slowly as you try and push that level of speed. For me, I'll just try and go from the slow version and then increase the speed without stopping to talk, and then kind of go back and assess what I think. So if we start slow, and towards the end, when I'm trying to push the speed as fast as possible, getting it pretty rapid. I don't know, is that 30-second notes? I think it's decently fast, but it's not as clean and pronounced as I would like it to be when it comes to the actual sound. And I think the emphasis of the sound set always comes down to the rim shot, the third sound that's anchoring the set, because it's the sharpest and usually the one that your ear is going to kind of track to, especially when it's looping. You're going to be trying to see how often you hear that and how clean and consistent it is. And so that's usually the part where I think it gets muddy. But one thing that is sort of driven by how I practice and is probably going to affect how I use the chain for the TKK is how it's strung together with like a connecting sound. Because I don't really do just back-to-back triplet loops like that. Just the I practice it that way. But if I'm actually putting it into a beat, I can't see too many instances where I just want to throw like rapid fire triplets like that, just back to back. You can do that and it sounds cool if you can do it well. But for me, taking the pattern and either connecting it or adding in other sounds is a bit more interesting to the ear. And so an alternate way of practicing it would be to add in like an FT hat, in between the triplets, so it's becoming essentially triplet break, and the break is the FT snare or hat, FT hat that's connecting everything, because it kind of allows you to reset, and it gives your mouth anatomy a split second to sort of reset, and you can put everything back in position and be able to do that really quickly. And then the more you chain it together, the more seamlessly the chain flows, and it just sounds a little bit different. And I also like to start the TKK chain with like a kick as sort of the first sound, and then you don't really hear the kick after that because you're using connecting sounds in between the triplets. And so what does that mean? If we were to start with just the kick, is at the very beginning, and that starts the sound set, and after that, everything in between the triplets is some other connecting sound. In that case, it was an F sound. So doing it slowly, it would be, that's the first four, and then an F sound, and then the repeated pattern again. So let me do like an actual cycle repeat. So essentially, you've taken the triplet, the 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3, and you've gone 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4, and change it into 4 sounds being repeated. But if you want to practice sort of on the fly, mixing up the connecting sounds, that's a really good technique to practice. So instead of just going FT or BTKK, FTKK, and then FTKK, and doing the same connecting sound with the F, you can change it to like a double T TKK. So I think that would sound like, oh, actually that's just 4 4 4 3 after that. So you could do 4 4 3 4 3 4 and like alternate it essentially. Which I didn't even think. I mean, I guess that's how I practice it too. So it'd be Oh, interesting. I guess I do kind of reset with kicks every once in a while, like every 2 or 3 repetitions of the rhythm. Yeah, I guess you could consider like the one big chain of like 2 repeats, starting with the kick and ending with the second triplet. A little bit of a complex way of breaking down the way the pattern goes, but if you're doing it slow, it would be and that sort of variance in the just the start of the pattern each time it repeats is making it so that your mouth anatomy isn't stuck into one position the entire time, and it forces you to sort of learn how to jump between the slightly different mouth positions to change up the way the sound set works, which is hard. It's not something that's easy to grasp right away, and you have to just kind of drill and practice at it till you get muscle memory. But taking that slight variation and then just drilling that over and over again. You can even just be doing BTKK until you get really comfortable with that chain, and then just start practicing FTKK and then put them all together. Like you could do like a BTKK 4 pattern, which sound like sounds kind of like just an EDM tempo, really, but it's got these really quick, rapid triplet patterns that come in after the kick. So it hits hard and has a lighter, faster sound set that comes after it, and then it just repeats over again. That's how you're getting them. That's probably a good entry point to start when it comes to taking the TKK and adding on just one other layer of complexity just to give you something else to practice. Likewise, you can do an FTKK cycle and repeat that over and over again for a 4 set, which would sound like. That's a little bit more difficult. It actually sounds kind of like a record cut at the start of the sound set. The problem is, like, where I'd like my TKK to sound, I want it to be much louder. And I think that is going to be having to push the intensity of the snare, because the TK, you could put more emphasis on the hat and then the K sound. So instead of just maybe like a and really push it, but it's going to make it slower. So I think of the 3 sounds in that bass triplet set, you want to put the most emphasis on the snare. And that is practice. Brim shots don't sound super loud compared to like an outwards K, just because there's no breath power. It's all mouth muscle and just internal mouth pressure. There's no lungs behind it. So if you compare which comes across decently loud, but doing it on its own, just but you compare that to an outwards K, which sounds like, I gotta be careful with the mic on this one. Not only is that easier to do, but it's much more sharp and forceful, and it really comes across prominently. Like you do two the same beats, but you swap the snares out. Maybe you do something like, do the same thing. That was with the rim shot. You do the same thing with an outwards K. And I don't know how easy it is to tell on stream audio, but the snares are very different as far as their volume. The rim shot is quick and sharp, but it's not as loud and as forceful as the outwards K. Likewise, if you were to take the rim shot and compare it to an inwards K, I think it would probably be a little bit closer, but depending on how you do the inwards K snare, it's still going to come across sharper. So if you can compare rim shot to inwards K, the inwards K includes that little bit of kind of breathiness to it, but it's still sharp. Especially when it's been done for a long time and been well practiced, that inwards K is going to have a real sharp kind of crisp sound to it, and it's a bit more sustained than the rim shot because they're done the same way. That's why I wanted to compare them. It's just the inwards K that is with breath power being chopped off real abruptly to create the snare, and the rim shot that is the same motion just without breathing. And so to tie it back together and why I'm even talking about this specifically, I think, and I've been trying to practice doing rim shot drills separate from the bass TKK patterns, because rim shot's useful snare everywhere. It's not just used in Technicality. You could use it as a regular snare, but it's a pretty functional sound. I think I need to just drill mine to be sharper and louder, which is just going to take time and pushing practice. So one fairly simple pattern that I've been practicing that I got actually from my POTO drills, I kind of sort of adapted that, is just doing a simple multiple kick to rim shot pattern and just looping it over and over again. It's very simple, but it could do it fast, and it's going to force, again, that muscle memory and kind of drill rapid rim shots. And so starting with like maybe single or single double kicks combined with the rim shot, just those 2 sounds, the kind of variation of patterns that I've been using in practice sound like then trying to pick up the speed just like you would for a technicality pattern to force muscle memory to get quicker and more accurate while still maintaining similar type of rhythm. And this is kind of like a drum and bass switch up tempo, maybe something that's going to be really kind of rapid in like an electronic type of breakdown. But if you take the and it doesn't need to be exact every time. The point is the speed more so than the pattern itself. But if I try and push the speed even faster, and this is what it sounds like, and I'll see if I can hit like the absolute limit of speed just for the example purposes. So if you take the and I was running out of air. But you can see how just pushing the tempo and pushing the speed faster is training you to basically go from two very different mouth position sounds, a lip-based sound with the kick, and also giving you practice on rapid kicks. That's also a really important skill to focus on every once in a while. But you're taking that and you're learning how to go from the kick to the rim shot as quickly as possible. And that's how you're getting sort of bouncing back and forth if you can think about where the sounds are coming from. And it does help to, again, speed train. This is a speed and accuracy training as opposed to any other type of endurance. I think this is endurance training as well. I can't do that for super long, especially because you can't breathe while you're doing it. Well, I guess you maybe if you like circular breathe through your nose, but largely when I'm doing that, I have to stop and breathe after I've done that for a certain amount of time. But also just alternating between the rapid kicks and the rim shot, my mouth muscles get tired, specifically my tongue. My lips can probably do kicks all day, but my tongue is the one doing the rim shot, and that does have like a physical endurance limit. So doing that particular type of training is going to, again, increase endurance for just doing that snare, while also hopefully teaching you to be more accurate and more precise with it too. So if we think about ways to sort of vary up the difference in the rhythm, again, this is the training and drill type of examples that we kind of work into this discussion in sound theory. If you were to, let's say, start with a rhythm, let's say you did like triplets, like kick triplets with the rim shot, just those two sounds, but you're kind of varying up the rhythm. So maybe like, and then maybe a switch after doing that for a certain amount of time, adding in another rim shot, where essentially it always comes down to running up that hill. That's the rhythm from Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush. But changing up the pattern of the kicks is important too, because it's giving you, again, that consistency practice with kicks, which I don't think I've talked enough about because there's such a basic sound. But if you want to add complexity and layers to the beats that you create, getting proficient with kicks is pretty important, because anyone can do single kicks when they're learning basic beatboxing stuff at the beginning. You know, just doing, we won't use the rim shot as in this example, but like just a simple hip hop beat, like even a hip hop / rock beat, depending on what you put around that. Pretty simple. It's one and then a double quarter note kick, essentially. Not that complex. Usually people within the first week can string together something like that without any real issue. But kicks are so versatile and powerful that I feel like it's worth mentioning to people who are interested in learning beatboxing that it's very beneficial to structure some training around getting faster and accurate with kicks as well, because that's how you're getting the ability to do, just like we did before with that triple kick pattern, fast double bass pedal kicks, kick rolls. If you think about something like a blast beat type of rhythm with the kicks, maybe not necessarily all the snares and everything else, because trying to do a blast beat in beatbox can be very tough. But if we were taking just the and turning it into a kick roll to emulate like a double bass series of pedals, you'd be getting, and you could take that sort of idea and put it into the other beats to give yourself rapid kicks instead of just 1 and 1 2 and 1 2. And that's how you're getting things like or like a galloping beat, something a little bit faster that has more pickup to it. And that might be like maybe drum and bass. That's probably a good place where you use something like that. Something like that. And so again, that's a BTB, that's a triple kick technically. But that's the type of variation on the technique and rhythm that's not just innate. You don't just learn kicks and have the ability to do rapid kicks just automatically. You have to train for it. And so I guess as a beginner tip for people who are watching this and saying, I'd like to get into beatboxing, don't neglect your kicks is the takeaway there. They're simple in concept. In the Boots and Cats, it's just the B sound without the ooh, without any vocalization, just taking the and then getting some pressure behind it and then getting it to be clean and concise. But there's a lot of versatility with kicks that come with just practicing over time and getting better with the sound. So circling back to the whole point of talking about technicality and the TKK, what I've been trying to tinker around with, especially now that I've been trying to mix in variation with patterns, is how do I want to vary the TKK and add sounds around it to create something functional that's going to be something slottable into a beat. Because again, getting speed and competency and being able to do the fast is fine. You can find ways to use that too. But to me, taking that sound and pairing it with other technicality patterns is much more interesting and has a lot more potential for adding complexity and more depth to beats. And so we talked a little bit before about chaining the TKP, the first technicality pattern I learned, and chaining that with the TKK to get something like so that's TKP, rimshot, TKK. So it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3, 7 sounds in one, which gives it kind of a staggered rhythm, and you do that over and over again. Which, again, that would be pretty useful in something that's got that sort of start and stop staggered rhythm. But even if you weren't putting that 7 chain into any part of a beat, I think learning how to sort of Frankenstein's monster the technicality patterns together in different orders gives you more tools to be able to draw upon if you're creating beats, freestyling, or even putting patterns together for routines and constructing things. And that's sort of what I'm trying to apply and use all this stuff for. It's the whole reason why I'm practicing them. Another slight tweak to the formula for the TKK specifically would be changing mouth position so that the sound is being done the same way mechanically, but the mouth position is changing the way it sounds. And I think I've talked about this before, way back in several streams now. But in doing the TKK and then just changing the opening of the mouth, it makes it pitch shift a little bit. So if we think of, let's say, 3 TKKs in a row, just for the sake of an example, this same mouth positioning, it's just my mouth is just open. It's neutral. And you get, but if I take my mouth and I change the opening each time the triplet resets, so it's essentially changing the sound 3 times, you get something that sounds like, which is subtle, but it sounds like the pitch is sort of descending downwards with the rhythmic sounds, and it changes the way it hits. So if you're looping that, changing the sound over and over again, it sounds like, ooh, that's tough to do. I need to practice that more. That's not a good example. It doesn't sound good. If we, let me try and think on the fly. If we try and add a connecting sound in between, that makes it a little easier. The point of the discussion, and I apologize for not illustrating this super well, but you can take the mouth positioning to change the way that the technicality chain hits as you're doing it repeatedly. I just didn't illustrate it super cleanly because I guess I don't practice it back to back like that. Because you could even take that in a vacuum, so your becomes, the end becomes kind of like a co-sound instead of a rim shot, a standard rim shot. It becomes a, instead of less sharp, kind of more muted or blunt. And so I'm gonna have to think a little bit about that one, because I was hoping it would be like a good way to illustrate just from mouth positioning how it changes, but it's very subtle. I don't even know if it comes across super audibly on the recording or on the stream playback, because it's very slightly different parts of like two sounds in the whole chain. But that'll be a work in progress. I'll see if I can come up with some better ways to show that for the next time we talk about technicality. So if we move on from TKKs, I don't want to monopolize all the discussion on sound theory with just that one set. But it's the one I've been drilling a lot this week after not being happy with its level, after neglecting it for a little bit in practice. Let's move on to the POTO, the big one that's been the focus of training and practice. And that one takes the regular lip-based pop, pretty simple sound that I think is almost universal. Anyone can make that sound. But it pairs that with a tongue click. A tip of the tongue click is how I distinguish that from like a regular standard click, which sounds like the one I'm talking about here, which I use as TO in the notation, sounds like it takes the tongue and right in the kind of hard palate on the roof of your mouth, using it real quickly as a fast hit to get that sort of click sound, and then using basically an O shape with your lips to change the way the sound comes out. So if I do it without changing mouth position, it sounds like, which is different from which is the back of the tongue sealed to the roof of the mouth and popping down. Using the tip of the tongue just has that click hit different, which is how you're getting them. And changing your lips into an O shape and giving it more of a hollow resonance is how you're getting a. And that's a really simple sound in practice, but I kind of underestimated how useful it is outside of even just the technicality stuff we're talking about here. You could take a TO click and just by changing the opening of your lips, change the way its pitch moves too, and just do it rapidly as its own chain of sounds, which is interesting. That gives you something like, you know, if you want to duplicate like a metronome rhythm, that's just a. And all that is the same sound, same place, slightly different opening of the mouth to change the way the sound comes across. It's a very versatile type of click. For the regular standard tongue click, it works the same way for that one too. Like if you change your mouth position, you get something like. But I feel it's not as pronounced. That, and it takes a bit more muscle effort to do that one, which is probably why it's a stronger, sharper sound. But in taking them, you can make it faster and more rapid. And I'm working on trying to get it even louder and more pronounced. But again, that was not a sound I really used until I started experimenting with this technicality pattern. And I'm pleased with the way it fits into a lot of things. So you'll hear it in a lot more beats as I sort of remember that it's there. But the technicality pattern, again, back on topic, the POTO sounds like it's PO pop and the TO click repeated into a 4-set. And one of the slight variations I talked about when I first started experimenting with this pattern is changing mouth position slightly to pitch down the second half. So the first two are neutral and the second two have a slightly different pitch. So that sounds like really only audible on the second TO. It drops in pitch slightly because I've changed the way I'm doing the sound with the mouth position. It's more open, I think. Yeah, a little bit more open, gives more hollow resonance, and it drops the pitch down at a fraction. So doing it back to back, you're getting a and if we think back, I want to say like a month, 2 months maybe at this point, when I first started messing around with this pattern, my ability to string this in chains and speed-wise has definitely gotten much, much more refined. And just like any other technicality pattern that you practice, just doing it over and over and over again gets your muscle memory and your mouth anatomy more familiar with doing it. I think the overall skill ceiling on a pop is a lot higher because my pop hasn't really changed. So I'm going to keep pushing it just to see, since there's not a ton of muscle exertion. It's really more just pressure using your lips to create that sound. But I might be wrong in that if you keep drilling and practicing, you can force the sound louder and be more forceful. We'll see on that. Maybe after another couple months of practicing it, we'll compare how the sound sets changed. But the TO, that's the one I've seen the most change. And so practicing both of those, I think is going to have like a bit of sort of parallel synergy as far as how they develop. We'll just have to see. For me, it's getting speed at this point. And so if we take the, even in a 2, we cut that pattern in half. Just, that was how I was practicing it initially. In fact, that's how I even found out that I could use this as a technicality sound. And so I started practicing it that way with just 1, 2, not changing the pitch of the second TO, just like TK essentially, practicing 2 sounds back to back and trying to see how fast I could push that was basically my drills in the beginning. And so it'd sound like and trying to go faster and faster. And like if I push it here, when we go faster, it sounds like it starts to lose its volume as it goes faster. But I'll tell you now, I couldn't do that a month and a half ago. It was just not a set that I practiced and had any sort of proficiency with. And so I could see it being a developing sound, and noticeably over the course of just, I want to say 2 months at this point. It's hard to tell. But over maybe 2 months of dedicated practice, it's gone from being a non-existent pattern to a noticeably cleaner and faster pattern, but there's got a long way to go. And so tying that back into the discussion of technicality, taking the POTO, and I like to connect it with an F sound in the middle to give my mouth a chance to reset and be able to do the sound a little bit more consistently. So it's becoming a 5 chain of rhythmic sounds. And that would sound like a little bit hard to hear. That little gap is the sound. It drops in volume a little bit, which is what I've been kind of working on to get it more pronounced so you can hear it. It doesn't sound like the pattern is stopping and then restarting. But another thing that's been kind of fun to sort of tinker around with is the idea of taking just the PO and the TO and then stringing them together in between to create like triplet patterns, which is a little bit hard to describe. But if we're taking a variation on the pattern, start with POTOs, and then try and add up a real quick, even more rapid section as a connector, it would sound like, and then it's basically taking the POTO and shrinking it down into like a rapid filler pattern, which it's like putting a filler pattern in between a bigger filler pattern to basically just make it more complex. And again, that's not something I even thought about doing 2 months ago and physically couldn't because I had no command of the sounds. But taking them and I'll try to explain with a bunch of different versions of that really quick, rapid thing mixed in between, just in a beat right here, so people will hear what I'm trying to explain. It might be something like, and again, it's a little scattershot because I'm trying to just change the way all of the sounds are connected. And it's probably not as audible as some of the other patterns we've talked about today. But I think that's going to be the next sort of evolution of the POTO in getting speed and figuring out ways to kind of create variance and change around the way the speed sort of affects the sound. It's really interesting to practice because it's different from all the other ones I know. And I've been trying, I haven't had much success yet, but I've been trying to connect the POTO to other technicality chains, like ones I already know. And it's difficult because it's such a different series of starting and stopping points compared to everything else. Like if we think of the TKP, and try and connect that to a POTO. If we try and put the POTO on the front and then put the TKP after it, it would be something like, that's not too bad because the TO, the final tongue click is close to where the TKP starts because the T in the TKP is a tongue sound. But if you put it the opposite way and you try and do TKP POTO, it sounds like, the P and the pop have the same starting place in that they're lip sounds, but the way they're done is very different. So if you think of a P or B, kind of synonymous with a kick, and then they're done in the same place, but they're done differently. So they don't cleanly transition between the two, going from a to. That's hard. That's a full reset no matter what. And so I've been thinking about how to connect them, and I'm thinking you might need to do something like a filler sound to give your mouth a chance to reset. So maybe something like TKPF POTO, which would be like, even doing an F. F is even harder of a reset from that position to a pop. Pop, in general, sort of is on an island by itself as far as things that are similar in technique. That's what makes it so hard. So even trying to do, I think the only way to do it would be like an TKP to the POTO is the only foreseeable way, just off the top of my head, I could think to do that. So maybe it would be, you might even have to lead with a tongue click and then do a POTO. That's hard. That's really hard. I didn't prepare anything for this particular example because it just occurred to me, but trying to do that's tough. I'm gonna have to put a pin in that one because it's very irregular positioning from one to the other. But because all of the chains and sound patterns and technicality have the potential for speed, if you can find ways to seamlessly connect them from one to another and get it to flow, it's going to sound really interesting. It's just a challenge to see in trial and error, what what fits together effectively and what is feasible to do. And it could be a muscle memory thing too. If you just brute force trying to put a pattern together, because anatomy is so flexible, you might find a way to do it just through rote practice over and over again, and then you've created a very irregular, uncommon technicality pattern. I don't know. I'm going to try. Between now and the next time we talk about this, I think we talk about technicality at least once a month. But between now and the next time, I will see if I can sort of come up with that pairing between two, because taking the TKP and the TKK, pairing those together is very easy. You can pretty much move them around in any order and it fits because they're done so similarly. But taking the POTO with pops, it's difficult. I feel like you'd be better off trying to combine the pop tongue click pattern with like hollow clops, like but I don't really do a lot of tongue clop patterns with technicality. If I don't do a lot of tongue clops in general. I can do them, I just don't do them as part of beats. That's another thing I need to figure out. But I will report back in the future, because I think, again, it's a topic I could talk about forever. I could devote 2 full hours to discussing technicality and how it fits into beatboxing and sound theory. It's fascinating, which is why I like it so much. But seeing as how we're coming up on an hour, I do want to devote a decent chunk of time to BGM brainstorming, because I want to make sure we're not sort of splitting our time. So we'll go ahead and move on to BGM brainstorming. So let me change my caption, and then I'm going to need to get everything configured with the synth, and we'll jump right in. All right, I'm going to turn Synthesizer Kun on here, and it's probably going to cause an audio pop on the stream. There we go. Well, just like before, let me volume check this here. That should be okay. Just like before, the way I want to structure this, and at some point, it changes my setup considerably, but I want to bring back Casio-chan, the other synthesizer I have. I haven't been using that one just because it's a little bit more limited in its tool set, and its timeout window before it shuts off automatically, I think, is shorter than this big synthesizer. But having both of them hooked up gives me maybe 1.5 times as many sounds I can experiment around with. So at some point, I'll bring back the other one. It's just my desk setup makes it difficult. I basically have a synthesizer on each side of me as I'm standing up here with the loop right in front of me on my desk. But what we can do, I don't really have a specific idea to start with, so let's do something electronic. Last time we sort of tinkered around with some more ambient and unusual songs with the potential for use in Halloween. In fact, let's talk about that before I even get into BGM creation. I'm going to turn the synthesizer off so you don't get fuzz. So it's kind of like a content update and sort of a what I've been working on. I'll do this now before we jump right into BGM, and that's fine. Looking at the upcoming plan for music-related stuff. This last week, I released the 3rd BGM collection online on streaming platforms, on YouTube, and Bandcamp. And that one was the collection of songs created over the last, I'd say, year and change, maybe a little bit less, of songs we've created here on these jam streams with the help of chat. And that was out. The reception has been pretty good. For some reason, that video got a ton of views compared to some of the other ones at release. I don't know how that happened, but that's good. But the next sort of goal, to give kind of a roadmap of what I'm planning, the next release is going to be in October. And I know I talked about this last time, so I won't spend a lot of time recapping the specifics, but The next goal as far as releases is Halloween, the Halloween BGM pack. And I'm not going to give too much info on what is going to go into it. I think I showed at least a couple tracks. At least one was created here on stream. No, two tracks I think we created on stream here. But in September, probably after Extra Life, since I'm going to be gone into the first week, when I get back from Extra Life, there'll be a trailer that goes up for the Halloween pack. And that's going to be probably middle of October. I need to kind of plan out when the release is going to be. I don't want it to be the 31st. I'd rather it be in the middle before the holiday. But there'll be a trailer going up kind of announcing what the project looks like and who I'm collaborating with for that one. I will say, and I mentioned this last time as well, I'm really excited for the Halloween project. The music tracks were a lot of fun to write and kind of tinker around with. And I feel like compared to last year, which I enjoyed working on last year's Shadows Dance album a lot, it was a bit of a transition period as far as going from a pure loop station based series of sounds to actual arrangements and using the synthesizer as a paired instrument. There's kind of a mix. Some were pure beatbox sounds and some had the synth mixed in. I hadn't quite figured out mixing, and there's a bit of distortion on that release, which drives me nuts every time I hear those tracks. It's subtle, and if you're not listening hard, it's probably easy to miss, but I can hear it, so it's one of those things that I think I've corrected a decent amount. But the tracks for 2023's Halloween release are, I think, a bit more refined. They have to be. They can't be less refined than last year. But the sort of idea progression of like a quote unquote story between the tracks and the sort of vibe, I think is really neat. I'm not trying to toot my own horn excessively here, but I'm really excited for you all to be able to hear the tracks in that Halloween release because it's shaping up to be fun. All of the tracks are done, working on art stuff right now and getting all that lined up. But there'll be more to come. There'll be a, like I said, teaser in September, and then we'll be shooting for a mid-October release on that one. Looking beyond October, towards the end of the year, I don't know if there'll be another release for BGM this calendar year before, end of December. I'm going to be gone for a stretch in November. I have to take a trip that I wasn't originally planning to take, but it came up last month. And so I'll be out for about a week. I won't be able to do any content then. Depending on some other things I'm working on, I'm not going to rule out a release, but it would most likely be like a late December, sort of towards the end of the year release. I don't know. Right now I'm going to say no guarantee. I'm working on a much bigger project that's going to be early next year, but it's so preliminary I can't really say much about it. And I'd rather focus on that one than try and put together a quick release before the end of the year. Because to me, I'd rather err on the side of quality versus quantity. And so Halloween might be the last one for 2023. I don't know. We'll see. It'll depend on how productive I am off stream too. But in addition to just what I've recorded and things I've planned, I've been doing a lot of brainstorming and writing. I have this crude notepad document where I put all of my BGM ideas. And there's a couple specific themed releases that'll be probably sprinkled throughout next year. Maybe if things align perfectly, there'll be one of those before the end of the year, but I'm not super confident that's going to happen. But kind of like we did for Neon Night Lounge and Far Future Days, I'm not going to do a double album release again like that, at least not for a while. That was a lot of work. But they'll be kind of genre specific and style specific type of releases. I want to do another chill one, and I want to do another electronic type one. So those are what I'm working on right now, but I don't know when they're going to come out. And so that's a bit of a roadmap sneak peek into next year. We'll just have to see how things play out. But all in all, a lot going on. Busy as usual, but a lot of exciting things in the future. I've thought about potentially learning another music program, another way to create songs that is gonna probably be under wraps until I either do it or feel like I'm confident enough to show it on stream. We'll see. We'll see. There's a lot to kind of consider. That being said, I'm going to switch the boosts off, and I'm gonna start putting together things for, like I said, an electronic type of loop song, and we'll see what comes together, and then I'll put the track together as much as completely as I can, and then I'll come back and turn everything on and talk again. So it'll most likely be a bunch of noodling around, and then we'll circle back, talk about what we've created, and go from there. So let's see, we'll turn this off. In fact, I'm going to turn my mic all the way off. Some of these stream tracks still get a little bit of distortion, and it might be coming from the fact that I have my mic on. So I will turn that off and then start creating everything from the rhythm up, and we'll see what happens. I'll turn everything back on real quick. I see Ladybug is here. Hey, Ladybug. Thanks for joining in and coming to hang out. Hope you're having a good Sunday. I don't know if you heard what I was just explaining as far as what I'm going to be doing, but just like last time, I think you might have been here last time, I'm going to start putting together the ideas for a BGM track, and then we will reconvene and then talk about it. I just didn't want to get started without at least acknowledging that you're here. So we'll see what evolves, and if any ideas come up as far as things we could put into the actual song, feel free to drop them in chat. So let's see. Okay, I'm turning my mic off again, and let's get started. All right. Let me turn all my mic stuff back on. So what do we create? This one, once again features prominent use of the slicer effect. It's how you're creating the kind of sequenced beeping and rhythmic noises on both the bass line and the melody. Let me make sure I don't have this too loud. We take the bass line, and you can hear how it sort of has that disjointed kind of sequenced rhythm. It's rapid. That's slicer. I like slicer a lot. I need to be really careful not to overuse it too much. But it's very powerful because it creates a rhythm out of a sustained note. This is just me holding bass line notes, and then the slicer effect is what's chopping it up like that. We combine that with a pretty standard 4/4 electronic rhythm. Here's how we get them. I'll leave it right around here so I can talk over this and it won't be too loud. Pretty basic foundation. Yeah, nothing too out of the ordinary as far as a song construction goes. The third track in the loop that I created was the high melody, the high synth. And for some reason, I might have to re-record this later. I'll have to think about that. It might be the BPM of the loop itself, but there's a little bit of sort of distortion on the strings, and I didn't want that. I wanted it to be just sustained and clean. But that sounds like this. It's subtle. Like it sounds like it's a little bit distorted. I don't know exactly why it's doing that. But this basically takes the bass line notes, it plays around with it, adds a couple more, but it is octaved up. So it's the same notes with like one extra, but pitched upwards to create the high melody. We'll drop this in the mix down a little bit. Another thing that is, in fact, let me turn off the synth, because I don't need it for the explanation. It's just creating more fuzz. So this particular track has a more sustained main melody. The strings here are a supporting or supplemental melody. They kind of are in the background and they're there to complement the bass line. But the track 4 loop is an actual sustained melody that goes much further, or for longer rather, and it sounds like this. Again, using slicer. Using slicer to break up the sound. The main synth that comes from this is a really cool, versatile synth. I'm still trying to find a way to kind of repurpose it into like a chiptune type of sound. I think I can do it. I just haven't figured out how yet. But this particular melody, it has the same chopped up effect because everything is on eighth notes, I think is the slice sequence. But it sort of goes up and goes in between the notes of everything else. I had to be careful not to go completely dissonant with it, but I think it's kind of interesting because the bass line doesn't really change. It's 2 notes. The high melody with the strings has 3 notes. And so those 2 don't really change a whole lot. And then you have this rhythm, which has much more variation and moves. And I think it pairs decently with the others because the others are consistent and this one is actually moving around as far as the notes go. And then the 5th track is sort of a utility additional low synth using the same preset without the slicer on it. And it sounds like this. And that sounds like a MIDI sequence instrument. Something you might hear in like a Sunsoft game. That instrument, not the notes, but the instrument reminds me of Blaster Master, which is why I want to kind of find a way to purpose that into future things. But it creates this kind of low plodding tempo. And I think in an actual final version of this song, I would not have it playing constantly. I'd have that fifth track kind of come in and out. But it does create kind of an interesting sort of tempo reinforcing sound that your ear picks up a little bit. So I want it low. I don't want it high in the mix, because if I turn it way up, it's going to be all you hear. Your ear is immediately going to be drawn to that 2-note repeated chain over and over again. And we don't want that. We want it to be dominant. Ladybug says, yeah, I see what you mean. That would be cool to take that sound somewhere. One thing I thought about, and I had a problem with the third track. I couldn't figure out why it was recording weird, and I realized it was on reverse by default, which is probably from the previous track I copied these settings from. But if we turn everything off and we take it sounds like Jaws. If we reverse it, it's basically going to flip the whole rhythm. I don't know if that's really functional, something we can use. It's just an interesting effect. Ladybug says, Blaster Master OST is a treat. Oh yeah, the NES Blaster Master is one of my favorite games on the NES library, and its soundtrack is so much fun. Maybe with the exception of the last level theme, which is very weird and it's supposed to be like atmospheric. Every other track, like levels 1 through 7, are just bangers. It's the classic Sunsoft like OST instrumentation set, and like this here reminds me of the 4th level in the sewers. But this particular synth, number 329 on my synthesizer, it has that sort of filtered MIDI-ish type of notation to it. It's what it sounds like. And so I'm thinking if I could find a way to sort of tweak the way it sounds a little bit, I can basically make it mimic the way you hear like that Blaster Master OST instrumentation. And once I figure that out, you can be sure I'll be putting it into songs, because I think you can do some really cool sort of chiptune adjacent type of sounds, which is one thing I really want to learn how to do. So if we take the master track and we're playing everything at once, we could see how beat repeat plays with this and think about structuring like maybe a semi drop. So let's see. I'm gonna turn everything on, then we'll see if we can take beat repeat and use it to sort of cut up parts of the track or the whole track. Okay, so this is taking the entire track. Hopefully it's not too loud. This is taking the whole track, and it's basically using beat repeat to chop and repeat one section. That's what you're hearing looping over and over again. And if I up the intensity on the repeat, it'll start repeating that section faster. I'm thinking we wouldn't want this effect on the main melody no matter what. So what if we turn that off? And now we try and apply the repeat with just everything but the melody. There we go. What if we turn it off on the bass line too? That's closer. I'm thinking it might be the most practical to have the repeat only on the rhythm. So if we take it off of strings, could put it on 5. Oh, it's already on 5. So this could be used as like a part B or like a rhythm switch up, because all I have to do is toggle it on and off. It's one button. And then as soon as you turn it off, the rhythm returns to normal. What if we went faster? Upping the intensity on the repeat, you're basically losing everything else except for the kick, and you're going basically into like a rhythm that's just rapid kick. I think I like it better with the kick plus the hat. It makes it sound a little less empty. I dropped out the string synth track just to see what it sound like. I think it's fine in there. Okay, let's save our work. Do not want to lose all my work like last time. When we were on stream last time, I posted this in the Discord, and I don't know if anyone saw it, but when we were working on the Death Door Ceremony track last time, I went on this slight tangent talking about how it had been a long time since I put together a loop and then forgot to save my work. And then I promptly forgot to save my work. So when I turned everything off after the stream and then went back to go look at the track, it was gone. So I had to redo it from the ground up. Fortunately, I can listen to the VOD and remember what we put together, but I lost that entire track, which is very embarrassing. So we'll not do that this time. I've saved. And everything is captured for this one. So what I'm going to do is sort of do a real quick run through of how I think this one will be performed and recorded for the final version. In the meantime, I'll take any suggestions for what to call this one, since it'll need a name, and then I can write that down for when I go in and record this one down the road. So feel free to drop any ideas for a title on this one in the chat, and I will run through sort of the rough structure of how I see this one being performed, and then we will move on. I think if we start bassline first on this one. Maybe bassline plus string synth? Nah. I like the synth as a reveal once the track starts up. So I think we would go like bassline first and run through the whole thing. Now we bring in the strings. We bring in the main melody and the fifth rhythm melody. And I'm thinking we go into the rhythm change after one cycle of just the main melody here. So now we turn on beat repeat. Then we go to part B of the song. Maybe we cut everything out from the high synths. And we let the bass line and the rhythm just play for a little bit. And then we bring in the rhythmic fifth synth, low synth. This one sounds like the mixing is dominant on one side. Exactly, it is weighted heavily on the right. There we go. We want that center pan. I don't know why that track number 5 was set to the right. Okay, let me bring in the strings. For the outro of the track, I think an idea could be to cut out the rhythm and then the fifth synth and go for just a showcase of the bass line plus the strings. And then that would be the end of the track. I like the idea that the main rhythm, the one that moves all over the place, is not featured constantly. It kind of shows up, it runs for a couple repeats when you have the rhythm switch, and then it's gone. So you're not hearing it constantly. That would be a bit of a departure from some of the other ones where the main rhythm shows up and then it stays for the entire track and it's all you hear. I like the idea that instead of doing that, it kind of comes, doesn't overstay its welcome, and then you don't hear it again until the whole track repeats. So it's a bit more of like a limited snapshot instead of here's the main melody, you're going to hear it for the duration of the track. And that's a little bit different. Okay, let me save what I tweaked here. So for this one, it being like an electronic type track, I'll probably assign some sort of like futuristic type name. I don't need one right now. The naming is something I open up to the floor here if people have ideas, and if not, I'll usually come up with something later. That way, when I put this onto one of the releases, it'll have its own name. Okay, I think we can go ahead and move on to the next track. Let's try and do another one. So let me save everything into a new file, and we will repeat this whole process over with something different. Okay, everything moved over to another file on the loop. Now, thinking of style and genre, we did an electronic kind of dance-ish type song. Now, I'm trying to think of different future projects. We could do something a bit more down-tempo and chill. Maybe something kind of more ambient. Last time or the time before, a couple times ago, we experimented around with blues. I'm not really a blues musician at all. That one was tough. But I kind of like the idea of incorporating some like lower energy, jazzy, kind of smooth type sounds. So let's kind of keep that as a rough structure in mind and then see what sort of evolves from those ideas. while keeping in mind the other stuff that I've done and not trying to just duplicate work and do something I've already done. So this one might be a very slow rhythm type song since I haven't done a lot of those. Maybe try pulling some trip hop elements since, like I've talked about before, I love trip hop music. I think it's fascinating stuff. So first, let me clear everything off. And what I'll do is fire up the synth again. And then I'll turn all the mic boosts off, and then we will put things together and then come back and talk about it. So let's get started. All right, let's bring it back and talk about this one. This one was weird. And this one was, for some reason, this one was a lot more difficult to put together than the one we just did. Maybe because it was a bit less straightforward. But this one was a challenge. But it is interesting. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the different components here. So I went with a slower, more simple beat because, again, we were trying to create something that was a bit lower in energy, kind of slower, more mellow. But the bass line skews the overall tone of the song a bit darker than I thought we were going to get. So if we start with the beat, the rhythm. Pretty simple. I could probably add something to this too. But for like an entry point in setting the tempo and the BPM for the song, I think it's pretty functional. But once the bass line comes in, let me tweak my settings here. I'm getting a bit of feedback. Let's see if we can cut that out a little bit. That should be better. I think it's the EQ. If I'm not careful with where I set the EQ, it can cause a bit of feedback. Yeah, I'm gonna drop it down a little. There, that should sound a little bit better. Okay, so when the bass line comes in, we'll do it like this. Again, it's interesting. It's messing around with the low tones using the one of the lead synths, and then putting guitar to bass underneath it to give it a lower end boost for like an actual bass line. This one, again, has kind of a darker melody to it, which we can definitely work with, and I don't think it's bad. It's just a different tone than I thought we were gonna get when I started putting it together. To complement the bass line, we have the first high synth. This is strings. Not strings, chorus synth, my bad. String synth was the last one. So this is a synthesized choir instrument, which you can do some really cool things with the like harmonization if you wanted to add multiple layers underneath, have like the equivalent of voices singing. But I think it kind of fits the mood. Makes this sound kind of more like ritualistic almost. Then the next synth we have, kind of the more dominant melody and instrument that I see coming through. This is a sax. This is a tenor sax, I believe. It takes the chorus melody and it slightly varies the note progression, so it's not just a carbon copy. And it kind of ends up in the same place, but it does it with maybe one extra note. And then the last track, this one is a filtered high instrument, filtered clarinet, I think is what I ended up doing. Simple 2-note transition, kind of like we did on the 5th track from the previous one. But one thing I was thinking about as I was putting all these together, this one might be at odds with the chorus synth, so they might need to be switched off. So if we take the chorus synth out, that's a little bit tricky. I'm not exactly sure which direction I want to go with that. And then for this one, if we were thinking about the way this one would be performed, I think we would have to start swapping instruments out and then sort of loop back and tie everything to the bass line and the rhythm. We could even do something like taking the melodies and then dropping the rhythm out completely, and it sound like this. And that's pretty functional too. One thing to think about for the final version of the song, and I gotta kind of kick around some ideas because I'm not exactly sure how I want to structure this one. I think the transitions between the parts where the rhythm is coming in and out is going to need to be sort of gradual. This one is going to sound very jarring and abrupt if it's just start, stop. I think I'm going to have to play around with the faders to bring in things like the rhythm instead of just starting it and stopping it at full volume. So like, for example, if we did this. Let's say we cut things out with just the bass line and the choral synth. And then we want to bring the beat back in. Instead of having it be instantly starting at full volume, we probably fade it in gradually like this. Which is just taking the fader from no volume at all and then just gradually sliding it up until we hit whatever volume we want, which I've done on a lot of tracks. It's what I try and do to make the transition when an instrument comes in not sound like it's just starting abruptly. Because when I record these, everything's playing at once and I don't record different tracks. So when I start and stop things, I try and make it a little bit more smooth. And then likewise, if we bring in the sax, we do the same thing. You can hear the instrument sort of build a little bit. There's a bit of a crescendo, I think it's called, as the sound comes up, and then it hits its max volume instead of just going start and stop. And so this is a particular track I think we'd have to be really careful about what's starting and stopping, or it's just going to sound disjointed, and we want it to sound a bit more smooth. All right, let me stop this real quick and save. And so this one, again, this one might require a bit of additional workshopping off stream, but I wanted to sort of put a framework in place for maybe a lower energy and it being a darker sort of ambient type track, which I could definitely find a use for somewhere. I just have to think about where exactly that's going to be. But I do think we'll be able to repurpose it into something. It was just a bit more of a challenge to put that one together compared to the last track. And so I don't think we have time to do another one. It'll probably take like another 30 to 40 minutes. So instead, why don't we start wrapping up here? Let me see. I wonder if anyone I know is online. Lib is online. I wonder if they just jumped on there doing a just chatting stream. We can go pop over to Lib, see how they're doing. So let me go ahead and mute this, and we'll go to outro. There it goes. And so today's stream was decently productive. We spent a lot of time talking about the sound technique side of things with the technicality. If you're interested in hearing what we talked about, I recommend checking out the VOD after the stream's done. And in the meantime, we will call that a session, and I need to figure out the schedule for next week. I mean, try to plan around the release of Armored Core 6, obviously, so when I figure that out, it'll go up hopefully before the end of the day today on the Discord and on Twitter. So with that being said, we will go ahead and head over to see what Lib's doing. Looks like they're just starting. So let's start off with a raid. So until the next stream, hope everyone has a good rest of your day, and I will catch you folks later.